Good evening and welcome to another edition of Choose the Challenge. I am Lawana Bradford and I'm excited to be here this evening to talk about a very special topic. And it's entitled Loving Day. And it is a conversation about freedom. And today I have a very special guest, the amazing Cornelia, aka Connie Brown, with me. And she is actually from a mountain community in Bavaria called Bad Torx in Germany. She is a first generation immigrant here in the US, has raised a beautiful family, and we will talk a little bit about what makes her family so relevant in today's conversation. She's also an amazing entrepreneur. She has an empowerment group called the Red Rose Conquerors, and she and her husband are real estate partners, moguls. They are not only making things happen in the real estate industry, but also are trainers of those who are coming up in the ranks in real estate. She is an author of children's books, and she's also the author of a book entitled When Black and White Makes Brown. She is an advocate for diversity and inclusion, and on any platform that she finds, whether it's in spiritual or it's in the professional rank, she is communicating the importance of us embracing all cultures, all ethnicities, all backgrounds, because we are one humanity. She is a woman of faith who has a passion and a love for change. And the next person you will see after this breakaway will be the amazing Cornelia Brown.
Today, remember, I am created to succeed, designed to win, equipped to overcome, anointed to prosper, and blessed to be a blessing. Boom!
Wow. Do you remember that one?
Oh my God, I have tears in my eyes. Miss Lawana, hello, how are you, beautiful lady?
I'm doing well. I'm so excited that we're able to sit down and have another insightful conversation. And today we're going to be talking about Loving Day. And Cornelia, some people are like, what are you talking about? It's not Valentine's Day. Is that what this is? It's not the sweetest day. It's not Sweetheart's Day. What is Loving Day? So I want to turn it over to you so you can just kind of introduce this segment for us. Is that okay?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for everything that you are doing for all of us women, entrepreneurs, but also women that want to shed light to things that really matter to them. You always undergird, you always empower. You are just absolutely incredible. And I always jokingly say when I grow up, I want to be just like you, even though I'm your older sister. But you know what? I am just so honored that you've asked me to speak on behalf of Loving Day today. First of all, I want to let you know that I knew nothing about Mr. and Mrs. Loving when I married my sweetheart, my love of my life, Mr. Bernard Brown. And we have what people call an interracial marriage. I always say I didn't marry a different species. I married another human being. He's just browner than I am. That's how I see him. But we came over to the United States, and I about 5 years into our marriage, I began to really study out what America is all about, with interracial marriages. Because I kept hearing when I told people that we got married in Tuskegee, Alabama, and I didn't really understand initially because I didn't speak English that well, that some people say we thought it was still illegal to get married there. And it never really hit me until one day I saw an article about Mildred Loving. And, I've always been very curious. And by then, I had a chance to get acclimated to the American life and begin to read more and study more. And I always loved history, and I needed to educate myself, with civil rights in the United States, because I really didn't learn any of that in Bavaria, Germany. We learned, what was going on in our country, but not really what was going on with civil rights over here. And I saw a picture of this beautiful lady, and she was married to a man from Virginia. And lo and behold, she looked African American. She's a brown skinned lady. Later on, I found out she's actually multicultural herself, African American, Rappahannock Indian, and some Cherokee Indian. So the indigenous community all within her. And she married this guy with Irish background, and but a Virginian. And they had to leave their state to get married. So I was like, wait a minute, is this why people keep saying we thought it was illegal for you and Bernard to be married in Alabama? So I began to dig a little deeper and found this couple in 1967 fighting the fight for us to render all the laws of the land unenforceable, the miscegenation laws. And where the Supreme Court actually had to render those laws unenforceable, that you cannot throw us into jail for committing an actual felony. And I just was mesmerized by her story, especially Mildred Loving, because, she was so shy. She was so, staying in the background, super humble lady, but she had to step forth because she ended up in prison for marrying the love of her life. And again, it just was incredible. Back to you.
Let's talk a little bit about because you used a word that some people may not be familiar with, which is miscegenation. And unfortunately, those laws were brought into this country in the 1700s, which basically is laws to preserve the quote unquote purity of the race. And it made it illegal to cohabitate, to marry, to have sexual relations with anyone outside your race, particularly if it was a white person with a non-white individual. I mean, that's what it was designed to protect. When we think about the purity of the race, it was designed to protect the purity of the white race. Because Connie, we can go down another path when we talk about the raping and pillaging of your black and brown communities in this country. But we're going to stay focused on this conversation here. So when you got married, when you and Bernard got married, even though you said in 1967 the Supreme Court rendered it unconstitutional, we know, again, that's at the federal level, but then states have their independency as to when they choose to take things off their books, right? And exactly. The state that you were living in, and I want you to kind of unpackage this for us, in Alabama, it wasn't until the year 2000, 2000, folks, the year 2000, that it was actually taken off the books. That's scary.
That is beyond scary. And it frightened me. It frightened me to see the reality of that And I really began to dig more and more into what, how did people still feel about this, and why it took so long for all the states to take that off their law books. And at that particular time, I don't remember the exact percentage. I will remember for Loving Day. I have to write this down. But it was a very high percentage, over 20%. To me, that still is very high. But people said that we still should be thrown in jail for having gotten married. Okay, so that was in the year 2000. So once I began to see that there were organizations that began to celebrate that day and shed a light on to what is going on with this, I began to participate with the best that I could. And again, discovered so much in the process. Actually, on our first Loving Day, um, and by the way, Loving Day is on June 12th, because in 1967, on June 12th, that's when the laws of the land were rendered unenforceable, unconstitutional. But there is the flagship organization of Loving Day. Mr. Ken Tanabe decided in New York that he is going to shed light on this. And actually, we are highlighted in there for our Jonesboro Loving Day and all the Loving Days that we had. And they are shared with people. You can go there. You can, help bring awareness to it. And so we began that journey over 10 years ago. But Mrs. Loving's ex-daughter-in-law reached out to me. I was floored. I was absolutely floored. And she came to our very first Loving Day. And she's had, even though they were divorced, she's had a cordial relationship with her ex-husband, who now has passed also. And she shared so much about the family, and she shared so much about the hardships that they had to go through, and that how difficult it was for that family to speak up and speak out. But see, there comes a day, and this is what I want to unction everyone. There comes a day, no matter how humble you are, no matter how shy you are, no matter how far in the background you are, if you are the chosen one, God is going to bring your situation to light. And stop me when I need to. But that day when she was in jail, she decided to write this letter. And she wrote the letter to the Kennedys. Now, God had to be in that. My faith is just gets more and more vibrant every time I think about this, because back then, if this young woman in prison, in jail, whatever you call it, wrote this letter, for that to even arrive at the Kennedys, that was a miracle in itself, that no one trashed that letter in between. And that letter was received by a person that actually cared and handed it to Kennedy's, which was one of his top attorneys. And guys, there's a movie about it. You can watch it and you can see it. And in there, it will give you an idea what took place. But think about it. She wrote that letter. And that
I want to pause right there, because throughout history, there have been many transformational letters that have happened. We can go back into the Bible and Paul and the letters from the jail. And as you mentioned, Mrs. Loving, she wrote her letter. We think about MLK, letters from the Birmingham jail. So what it signifies to me, and I want to turn it back to you, Connie, is sometimes when we're in bondage, even though that's a state of temporary restraint, that's when I believe we can rise up in our strength. That's when, as you mentioned, you're a person of faith, so am I, that God is able to break those things in us that need to be broken so we can rise up in his strength and move forward and break down some barriers that we may or may not live to see, right? But we're that initial force to press through. And that's what she did. I mean, to be an African American woman confined and take a bold move to say, I'm going to write to the highest office of this land and plead my case is a pretty bold move. I don't think many people even today would be comfortable enough to take that type of stance.
Absolutely. And then, again, so often you see the writings about this story, and, it uses Mr. Loving's name first, and we have nothing against him. Okay. But no, and he stood behind his woman. He took a step back and allowed this to take place. And again, they help to bring such a light to the unfairness of this situation, because again, that law, and let's just call it what it is, against race mixing, and I always tell people I believe in the human race, and I always tell people I just married someone that's browner than I am. I have to sit in the sun longer than he does. He's from a very different culture. That's a whole different story, growing up differently and going through those things. But then we have our own story, and in this I found I did not know, honestly, to tell you the truth, where I belonged. And people would always say, well, if you're going to, go over to their race, then that's where you belong. But then, to be real honest with you, there were people, of the African American communities that would say, just because you married a black man doesn't mean you belong here. Because, I'm going to shoot straight. Is that okay? I'm going to just say, I would have African American women that were very angry at me that I married Bernard. And really, what I would constantly find myself explaining that I did not go out and search for a black man that day. I did not. We intersected outside of a place in Germany, began to talk, and then had a friendship that grew into a love that shocked us both. We both were shocked. My husband, if you would have asked anyone where he went to school, Tuskegee University, they would have never thought that he would come home with a foreign girl. He was shocked when he asked me to marry him. He was shocked when we married at Butler Chapel. And let me just share with you, that is a very historical church in Tuskegee, Alabama. There actually were underground meetings in the basement of Butler Chapel, which is a Methodist church, an African Methodist church. Forgive sometimes I get it a little bit mixed up. But again, that community had to separate from the other Methodist church, so separation, segregation, all that stuff. And here we got married in there. And people didn't know what to do with us, and we hardly knew what to do with each other. We had to learn each other's ways. We have to learn each other's, how we operate. And one thing that God showed me, and with Mildred Loving, I found my place. I found my place where I said, that's our community. That's something that I can speak up and speak out for. That's something I can make a difference in sharing with people how actually normal our union is. We are the most kooky couple you can ever find. We're not the perfect couple. Sometimes I see on Facebook when people say, oh, Bernard and Connie, such a wonderful couple. No, we are the same like any other couple. We argue. We are both leader spirits. So but we found ourselves in our community with Mildred, Mr. and Mrs. Loving. And we found how we can support others. We found out that some multicultural, racial, whatever you call them, interracial couples stopped going to church because they were not accepted. You know, whole other subject there. The most segregated hour. Who
Yeah.
talked about that? Martin Luther King. And so they would go to church and they would not be accepted. They wouldn't know where to go, and constantly it would be like, where do we belong? We would be told, don't have any children. They will not know who they are. But I began to get a root system. And first of all, God helped me to work through all of that. And I was like, wait a minute, if my children know whose they are, their skin color, their shade of brown is not going to be the factor of their success level and how much they love. And I'm going to create my community where and again, stop, because I can get so
Well, no,
passionate.
no. I'm gonna interject right now because you said some very, you've given us a lot of richness to get our hands around. Um, but I was just thinking about, so you have the Lovings, and what they were dealing with is black and white, right? And that intersect, and what societal norms was saying is not to be, right? So the systems of the day were saying no. You and Bernard come along. Those systems are still there, spoken or unspoken, they were there, but you have another level that you're dealing with. So you have the black and white, but it's not American white, right? You as an immigrant are having to learn a different culture, meaning the American culture, and the resistance and challenges that this culture was facing, plus being indoctrinated to the background and experiences of your husband and vice versa with him. And as you're saying, bringing in your faith to this and saying, okay, where do I find a world, a space that I fit in? And then there's a fourth piece of it, and most people don't think about this, but the military culture is a separate microcosm. It's its own little unique world, and that's the world I come from. I don't classify myself as someone from Black America because that's not the America I grew up in. I grew up overseas in the military microcosm, and it's a different world. So you had all these pieces, stacked on top of each other, and you have to navigate your way around it. And as you said, find your tribe, find your community, find a way for you to rise up in your truth, in your authenticity, and in your voice, and say, okay, well, you're going to see Cornelia and Bernard Brown. You will recognize that we are here, that we matter, and that we are about change, and we're about accepting, and we're about loving. And I just want to encourage those of you that are watching here with Cornelia Brown, where you're talking about Loving Day, a celebration of freedom. And Loving Day is the time when the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that interracial relationships, marriages, sexual relationships, cohabitation was rendered unconstitutional, even though it wasn't until 2000 that the last state, Alabama, the state that Cornelia and her husband married, finally took it off their books. So we're getting into just some real truths here, that we've come far as a nation and as a people, but we still have a long way to go. And I'd like you to just bring us up to speed on what happened in 2022.
Unbelievable stuff. Just unbelievable. I sat there when the discussions arose earlier that year, and the Supreme Court once again began to revisit the right to marry. And we are talking about our interracial community right now. Okay, we're focusing on that. And that last year, the Respect for Marriage Act came about. And I'm going to read this to you. Okay, is that okay?
Okay. Yes.
Let me get my other glasses. I have my sunglasses here just in case the sun breaks through. But when you hit the 60, you need some help. So President Joe Biden signed that marriage protection bill, which is a major win for many couples, but we're talking about our couples right now. The bill marks an important turning point in a decade-long process to protect interracial marriage. So just like I was telling people all along, our marriage is not protected, which the safety net of humanity really has not been there. Okay. The safety net of church has not really been there, but the government has not really protected it. And I was not even that aware of that. So after passing the Senate and the House, the Respect for Marriage Act is now law. And that requires the federal government to recognize the validity of our type of marriage. So it's been 55 years, it says here, since a U.S. Supreme Court ruling first made interracial marriage legal in every state. But it was not protected by federal law until now. 2022. Recent remarks by a justice of the top court had caused some concerns that interracial marriage could be overturned by a possible future court ruling. Now we protect it. It goes on and on and on and on. Now we protect it, but in 2022. And why did this come about? Because so often people look at us as if, and again, as if we are different species. But I don't even think it's that. I'm sorry, it just went black all of a sudden. So I don't think it's just that. I think the fear, the utter fear of what a new community is not going to accept anymore. And that's what I call our remixed children. Remix. We have so many, we have people all over the world that are not pure, whatever people call that pureness. But they have so many different cultures in them. When they do their DNA, that should be a requirement. Everybody, when the baby is born, do the DNA and you see all the cultures and celebrate everything that this child is. Some by force, we know that, and we can't change it. We can only continue to shed light so it's never repeated again. But also some by loving families that just have intermingled. And like you said, military life, I got chill bumps when you said that, because we have a commonality. We just become a different breed when we are a military family. And once a military family, always a military family. Exactly. And one of the things that I think happens in the military, when the men and women join the military, they are stripped of their identity. What do? Everything is taken off. The head is shaved. Everything, their clothing, everything is surrendered. Of course, you can't surrender your skin color. However, everything is surrendered. So it has a uniform look, and then everybody put on the same stuff. This may not be militarily correct what I'm saying, but everybody put the same stuff on, okay? And so now the families of the military, of the soldiers that now are fighting together for the same cause. Supposedly, a lot of times wars is different. We know that. But we suddenly, as military families, we have to find ourselves in our blended community, and it just becomes a whole new nation. And that's what happened with people of that are multicultural, that look at the world differently, that just have a totally different outlook. Some may still struggle with identification. Some, I think that's always going to happen. But if they are
Yeah,
in a blended community, they're going to be all right.
and I agree, and I think it's about finding being comfortable with expressing your truth, whatever that is, and not allowing anyone to make you feel less than for being yourself. I mean, this month is Pride Month, right? So that's another example of a community fighting for recognition, for rights, for marriage freedoms. I mean, all of these conversations are bubbling up as should it still be? Should it not be? Will it stay forever and ever as part of the law, or will we go back? And that's frightening that we would even have these types of conversations. And as you were sharing your story about you and Bernard, I was thinking about my aunt. My father's 92, and his older sister, if she were still living, would be 116 because my dad was a baby of the bunch. And she married a white guy, and they lived in Kansas City. And so in the 40s, they had to leave and they moved to California. Again, just for the safety and the preservation of their marriage, but they also spent a lot of time outside of this country just because of that. But she decided, because of how ugly the world was, that they were not going to have children. So that was like a conscious decision, which is odd for back then that they made. But I think it's sad that so many people do make choices because they're like, I don't want my children to face this ugliness. But I think what you and Bernard are doing, and I'm an outsider looking in, it's teaching your children. It's not about taking sides, right? You are who you are. You're this composite of this rainbow of everything that you are. You know, all the ethnic mixing is now you, and you show up as you. And I think it's celebrating all of those pieces. And I just want to share this one thing with you. My father, even, and I love this one thing I love about genetics. It's like, even though someone may be a darker complexion, you'll think that they're of one race or something, but you won't necessarily realize that they may have multicultures in them. Yeah. So my father is a darker complexion, but when you look at his face, people think that he's Middle Eastern. But his grandfather, no, yeah, his grandfather was biracial. So on that side, they are a direct lineage of the Bradford. So they are not, that is not a slave name. That is a birth name all the way down. And he would share stories with us that back then, my dad was born in 1930, that he was able to go and sit at the counter, what is it, the little ice cream counter with everybody else. He was able to walk in there with his little white buddies from his community. He was able to go into different restaurants, but others couldn't. And I said, how did that happen? And he said, well, they would say, oh, he's a Bradford boy. So because of his name gave him access. Well, I want to encourage all of you that who you are as a human being gives you right and gives you access. Yeah. And you have to stand up and own your place and own your space in this world. And sometimes it means coming against people and systems that are trying to keep you out. If you feel that you're meant to be at the table, then fight for your place at the table. Or as Shirley Chisholm said, create your own table. Back to you, Connie.
I love that. Create your own table. And this is why, one of the things is, I want to just backtrack a little bit. The state of Georgia this year, very recently, just took out the word diversity out of the school curriculum for teachers to use. They don't want them to use the word diversity. They want them to use the word different. Okay. And my thing is different from whom? So, it's the other community could be the different. and the brown community is the norm. But see, all these games that people continuously are playing, we need to, diversity is a strength. So my community is always going to be diverse. So on Loving Day, and I tell people all the time, we are not about accusation, we are about revelation. And we about shining, shedding a light on some things that did happen so they will never happen again. And then have the people from all cultures come together, because after all, Ms. Lamana, we know the world is not just black and white. There are other people
Yes.
in this world. And so I always want to say that, and this is why on Loving Day, I always want to take one community to shed light on what they are going through. And this year is going to be Hawaii. And why? Because we lived there for 6 years. We were in the military. My husband was on Schofield Barracks. And I tell you what, I loved it so much. My children thought they were Hawaiian. They had the Hawaiian accent and everything. And but what the Polynesian community is going through, and their plight right now. So many of them cannot live in their own land because they've been priced out of Hawaii. And they're moving to the mainland, that's what they call it, because they cannot afford their own land anymore. And so what we want to do is, again, with Loving Day, yes, we sharing what our multicultural community is, but we want to embrace other communities and say, we're not just about ourselves, because after all, in our multiculturalness, that's not even a word, I make up my own words. But in that, we will have Polynesian, we will have Asian mixed in. I will have a family, I hope they can come. They are Korean, African American, indigenous, and all kinds of awesome remixes of humanity. And we have to shed a light to all of it, not just one group. And we have to stop going into these corners and only come out for little events where we share and care. And then when it's over, we all go back to our corners and stay there. That's
Exactly.
not
And
healthy.
what you're doing is an example about, it's like, okay, I'm creating this platform to create this introduction and awareness, but hopefully we're building relationships that can continue beyond this moment in time. And one of our viewers said, there is color prejudice even in my homeland in Jamaica, where the majority of people are dark skinned. I find that there are prejudices even among African Americans and dark brown colored people in the U.S. Yes, we do. We have, whether it's a caste system, social system, uh, your differences in complexion, right? Among people of color, it does exist. There's different prejudices, your biases, conscious or unconscious, are there. We know that out of fear, the systemic injustices exist, because it's like, if I can place myself in a seat of supremacy, if I can place myself where you are beneath me, then I feel more empowered to control what's happening. And we know that America is becoming browner by the day. So I think that what Biden signed into place, it's beyond time for that, because America is becoming it's people say it's a melting pot, and I want to go back to that statement in 1 second, but it's becoming a beautiful blend of all shades of browns and tans and whatever. But someone gave me a definition, and I love this definition of diversity. And they said the wrong thing to classify us is to say America is a melting pot. Because when you're saying it's a melting pot, it means you're stripping everyone's identity away, and we're all kind of blending, and you can't tell what's what. But if you look at us as a salad, right? And you think about a salad, has the lettuce, it has its tomatoes, it has its cucumbers, it has its peppers, all of its ingredients blended together and make a beautiful salad. But yet the ingredients are still their ingredients, meaning our identity, who we see and say we are, is still seen and respected and accepted. You know, if I'm a tomato, I don't have to get mad at you because you're a cucumber, but we can coexist in this amazing salad called life. So I just happen to love that. Another person said the religious community is one of the biggest obstacles to forward, and I'm going to say momentum, to help us move forward. And we have a few more minutes, and I know because you speak on many religious platforms, you're a woman of faith. I would like you to talk to this statement here again. The statement is the religious community, this viewer thinks, is one of the biggest obstacles to us being able to move forward. What do you think about that?
First of all, it breaks my heart. It ought to not be, but it is. It has always been this way. You know, it is politics, religion, and all these things can really, really damage humanity. So the key is, and I'm a Christian. I respect I respect everyone. You know, I'm from a Christian community, but we have been told that we don't belong in a place because we were a mixed couple. And I have counseled mixed couples. I've been at book signings where mixed couples would come to me and said they don't go to church anymore, that they are not coming back because they are told that that they are committing a sin, because of so many um, misconstrued ideas of what the Bible says. One of the things I was point people to in Numbers 12, Moses married a Nubian queen. And there's a fun story. I was like, wow, God, aren't you awesome? You actually put us in there. And rather, and some people say, yeah, that he married the Nubian queen because it was a cultural thing. You married, to expand your land and all of that. But nevertheless, there was a moment there, and his sister spoke against that marriage. And if you guys read it, if you're a Christian, read it, and you will see what happened to his sister. God ousted her. She had to leave the camp. She could not come back in. And she actually began to show an affliction, a skin disease. Now he could have used a broken leg, he could have used anything, but how come that she actually had a skin disease? And she was not allowed back until the very one that she spoke against, that marriage that she spoke against, asked for forgiveness for her to bring her back. So, so again, people, use biblical things for their own purposes. But there are scriptures in there that say light ought to not be with dark, but that talks about something totally different. And again, this is why we want to be careful and not just be religious. We want to be spiritual people. We want to love unconditionally. We want to love because that if you follow Jesus Christ, and again, I respect everyone, but if you follow the teaching of Jesus Christ, he was different. Our Jesus was different. And, he loved that unconditional love where you look from the inside out. It is beautiful, all the different hues. I think the world would be so boring if we all were the same color, wouldn't it? And and it is so colorful, all the different fun things that we do from how we grew up. I love to watch my dad yodel in his lederhosen, and sometimes I wear my traditional dindu, and then I love to fellowship with my sister from Sierra Leone, and we actually took a Bavarian dish and mixed it with a Sierra Leonean dish to see what that would be, and it was quite yummy, may I say so. So it's like if we just start enjoying one another instead of just looking why we should not interact, why we shouldn't be. It's a strength. And this is why people try to keep people apart, because there is strength in unity. There is strength in if a Church community embraces truly everyone and loves them unconditionally. But I know what she's talking about. And to my Jamaican sister, um, I love Jamaica's motto, out of many, one people. And everyone that knows me at karaoke night, I become Bob Marley, who was a mixed person himself and has always talked about and shared in his songs and in his music, about bringing people together and saying, look at what's wrong, but let's do it differently. Back to you.
It looks like our video has frozen for a minute. I don't know why, but they can still hear us, so I think we're okay.
Oh,
Well,
okay.
yeah, they can still hear us. I don't know what's going on. I've had a little instability with some internet earlier today. But yeah, what you said is huge, and I think we have to. Loving Day, I think, is a time for everyone to not only recognize, as you said, the community of multicultural families, um, but also to ask ourselves, how are we showing up for this community? We can't say, and I know this bothers me when someone says, "Oh, some of my best friends are," and they'll whatever that race is. But then if you ask them, well, when's the last time you had that person over to your home? They don't. So, to me, if it's a person that's in your inner circle, they are in your inner circle. You were eating with them. An intimate time, of fellowship when you can break bread with another person who looks different than you, or a group of people who have different ideals than you, where you can still sit and break bread and say, I see you, I respect you. And that's what we're asking for here with Loving Day, is to recognize that the price has been paid, and for some, the highest price, for them simply loving the person they loved.
Amen to that. And if I may add, I want to again, we just had a icon leave the earth, Miss Tina Turner, and she got a lot of flack when she entered into her second marriage to a German dude. She fell in love with a German guy, but then moved to Switzerland. She moved. Literally, there are some articles where she shared that in this country she didn't feel accepted anymore. She felt tolerated, and she felt used and abused for the music, that for the money she could bring in. But so she went to Switzerland, into the mountains, beautiful, beautiful area. And so many people said he just married her for money. It had to have been, they had to find every other reason why they got married other than love. And she was so much older than him that she told him, you can get a younger girl, what you want with me. I mean, she was so straightforward in her conversations, just absolutely adored her. But she said, you know, I left and went into the mountains of Switzerland to be allowed to be who I really am, and to love the way that I really wanted to love. I found my soulmate. And she too said, I was shocked that he didn't look like me. And, just like I was shocked that Bernard didn't look like me. And he was even more shocked that I don't look and act like him. I'm the cuckoo bird in the family. And he is the military guy that has it all together. But again, allow people, and that's what I want to share with everyone. So as you going out and about, and as you see in all these different relationships beginning to form, and the love bloom, that's where the time comes where you get to decide, what am I going to do with what I see? Am I going to undergird that love, or am I going to speak against it? And here's another thing in God's word, it says, there is safety in the multitude of counsel. And, God speaks to us. He's, in this scripture, yes, I'm looking at the multitude as diversity. There's safety in diversity of counsel, where you get to hear, when you have a subject or a problem, and I speak to you, what do you think about this? I speak to my Asian sister, what do you think about this? I share, what does this Bavarian girl think about it? And then we hear the different takes on a specific issue. We may just come up with the right solution. Back to you.
Well, I want to show your little clip again before we close out, and we've got a few minutes left. And when that clip comes on, I'd like you to tell everyone who may be in and around the Atlanta metro area how they can participate in Loving Day with you on June 11th.
Today, remember, I am created to succeed, designed to win, equipped to overcome, anointed to prosper, and blessed to be a blessing. Oh!
Could you hear me? So here is the thing. If you cannot come to a Loving Day on June 12th, I would love for you to reach out to someone that doesn't look like you, that maybe doesn't even speak like you and have an accent of some sort, and just greet them, just tell them, hello, I want to introduce myself. I would love to one day fellowship with you, maybe have some coffee, maybe just chat. Maybe we can become Facebook friends and learn about one another. Make your own diverse life. Make a conscious effort. And again, help your children to understand that it's not so scary to meet someone from another nation. It's not so scary to speak someone that doesn't speak the same language. Teach your children that a diverse community is a strong, loving community. So let's make that difference on the 12th of June on Loving Day. And maybe you watch Mr. and Mrs. Loving. Is an awesome movie. You will see all the stuff they went through and then help us make a difference. Thank you so much. It's Cornelia Brown. I love you unconditionally.
I love that. So you have 3 opportunities. Reach out to, there was a call to action that Cornelia gave on June 12th, which is actually Loving Day. Reach out to someone who doesn't look like you. Create that interaction. Second, if you happen to be in the Atlanta metro area, I just want to show this again. You can join Connie and friends on Loving Day at Lee Street Park in Jonesboro. Lee Street Park in Jonesboro. You can also contact Connie on Facebook by Brown Cornelia, or email her at cornelia.brown@yahoo.com. cornelia.brown@yahoo.com. Connie, it has been amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your lived experience, helping us to be more aware and educated about what Loving Day is all about, and how we can be a part of the community. We can celebrate the community. We can uplift and help propel the movement of loving throughout the world. So thank you again.
Thank you.
And to everyone, we will see you next week for another edition of Choose to Challenge. And just remember, in life and in business, when your vision intersects with opportunity, when you have the opportunity to be loving to someone else, we ask that you choose love over hate, because love wins every time. Until next time, goodbye, everyone.